Assassin's Creed is a series that I have enjoyed since its first installment way back in 2007. I have been with the series through the greatest of ups and the worst of the downs, and through all of it I have mostly enjoyed what I've been playing and have fully immersed myself into the lore. In 2018, Ubisoft released Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and while I really enjoyed it as a standalone game, it was for me an awful Assassin's Creed title, and it eroded a lot of the goodwill that had been built up over 11 years previous. It stripped back all aspects that made an Assassin's Creed game an Assassin's Creed game. Assassinations, anyone? And it didn't tie into the rest of the series until the very end of the fourth main quest. It then relegated most of the important story that would advise what is coming next to DLC that most of the community did not play or watch. With this bad will overshadowing many of my thoughts, Assassin's Creed Valhalla would have a lot of work to do to fully win back my affections. So how does it do early on? My name is Doragon, and these are my first impressions of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. To give some proper context to my initial thoughts, we're going to take a whistle-stop tour of the rest of the series. My main reason for this is that what Assassin's Creed actually means to each individual depends on two factors. What was the first game that they played in the series, and which one made them feel like a badass? Depending on the answers to these two questions, Assassin's Creed 1 and Brotherhood for myself, will inform what sort of gameplay loop they tend to want from a new title in the series. For me, it is all about the stealth gameplay. Plotting a route, identifying the target, getting close and taking them out, preferably with the assassin's signature weapon, the Hidden Blade. This is why I love AC1 and Brotherhood so much. Whilst not easy to do, they made each game so that all bar the final confrontation with the big boss could be completed as intended by an assassin. Silent and swift in total secret. For me, there is no greater satisfaction than infiltrating an enemy base, eliminating any risks, taking out the target, and exfiltrating without triggering combat. From the Altair Ezio era of games, a total of 7 titles on multiple home and handheld platforms across 4 years, this is what Assassin's Creed was, what it was designed to be, what it was marketed as, and how it was played by so many of the community. From 3 onwards, it seemed like there was a shift in ethos, or a listening ear to a small but loud pocket of the community, and the Creed games started to shift to a more action-oriented series. Whether that be taking part in massive historic battles, naval warfare, or revolutions and gangland wars. Assassin's Creed pushed not only the stealth to one side, but the modern day story. In many titles, also the Assassin's Order, Assassin's Creed 3, 4 and Rogue for example, with Rogue even relegating them to the bad guys. And it even started to lean less and less on the storyline of those who came before, the precursors, completing large plot points that ran through multiple games in hidden side quests and off-screen in the pages of comics. Did you know, for example, that Desmond had a son called Elijah, that he was a sage, and that he was the one that defeated Juno, the big bad that Desmond released when he sacrificed himself to protect humanity at the end of Assassin's Creed 3. All of it completed off-screen in the pages of comics, which, considering the story beats were there in Syndicate for this all to happen in-game, is disappointing. But then came the new era of Assassin's Creed games in 2017, leaning fully into the RPG idea and letting players have more choice over stealth or confrontation, and giving us a new modern-day protagonist in Layla Hassan. Starting with Bayek and Aya in Egypt, we saw the last Magi morph into the first of the Hidden Ones, an order that would later become the Assassins during the Crusades. We went further back in time in Odyssey, so Cassandra could become the Keeper, meet Layla and pass on the knowledge and keys her gods had charged her to do so nearly 3,000 years earlier. In the DLC, more important information was revealed. Desmond's actions had triggered a different apocalyptic event, and only Layla and Desmond's teams combined could stop it according to Isu prophecy. But while Odyssey eventually gave us exceptional story beats after 150 plus hours, it did so only in DLC, and its gameplay was so unlike anything that had come before, even Origins from a year earlier, that while still enjoyable when taken at face value, in my eyes it didn't belong in the Assassin's Creed series. I left Odyssey disappointed, unfulfilled, and hoping that the next title could step up to my expectations of an Assassin's Creed game. For me then, Valhalla has to deliver on two key points while maintaining a high level of quality of all surrounding and supporting mechanics and structures. Those two key points are story and stealth. I am now 44 hours into the title, and whilst this would be leading towards the end of something like, say, Ghost of Tsushima, I'm not even halfway through the story in Valhalla, hence I can still technically class this as a first impressions. Let me start with that story. First, you should have finished or watched the Fate of Atlantis DLC from Odyssey. This informs the start of Valhalla. From Eivor to Layla, lost characters to the balance that must remain, the apocalypse upon humanity and the race against time for we assassins to stop it. All of the reasoning for this is outlined in that Fate of Atlantis DLC. In Valhalla, however, you are straight into the shoes of a young Eivor, maybe 6 or 7 years old at the oldest, and you are taken through the short half-hour introduction to the character. In true Assassin's Creed style, tragedy befalls our historic protagonist, and revenge is the only thing on their mind. Unlike previous games, however, this does not drive them through the entire title. Eivor is a Drenga, a mighty Norse warrior who sees battles or blood feuds through quickly. And while in her time, 18 years have passed, by the time she settles the score with her enemy, it's between 2 and 5 hours for the player, depending, of course, how distracted you get with side objectives. Within these first few hours, you also spend some time with Layla. And as in Brotherhood, you can exit the Animus at any time and learn more of the modern day story, get world updates, and speak to the supporting cast that we've been with since Assassin's Creed 2. Without even getting into the main crux of the story then, of what is being searched for in Eivor's memories, Valhalla's storytelling style, the lack of a revenge plot undercurrent throughout the game, and the stakes that rest upon its resolution had me captivated. There was enough revealed, including the Order of the Hidden Ones, Eivor's motivations, Layla's motivations, and even why we travelled to England from Norway in these first few hours, that my concerns about story were pushed to the back of my mind. The pointless storylines that didn't link to the rest of the franchise from Odyssey are also gone. Instead, there is one main story that runs start to finish. And while there are side quests called mysteries, which flesh out the world for Eivor, but aren't required to explain anything in either the main or modern day story, there has been no reason to grind anything throughout my entire time on the Berserker Master Assassin mode and break that flow of storytelling. This latter point is important. There were too many times in both Odyssey and Origins that I was forced to break the storytelling flow and go grind away at side missions and world bosses, all to boost my character to the appropriate level to not get one shot through the next story quest. This would then rinse and repeat more and more towards the end of the campaign in an artificial difficulty curve. Thanks to the storytelling not being broken in this manner, it feels more complete and cohesive than Odyssey, and more akin to the solid, structured storytelling of Origins and the narrative-driven titles of earlier in the franchise. The story itself seems to be trying to address all of the concerns that were raised off the back of Odyssey's story. It reintroduces the Hidden Blade in story beats, reintroduces the assassins / the Hidden Ones also through the story, linking the past exploration to the modern day and running the Isu story throughout the main quest, whilst also having 2 chunky side events with hours of content to go into the Isu further and explain that Isu Aesir lineage and events. The story that I have experienced thus far has felt like the right amount, with links to the wider Assassin's Creed universe, while also pushing the gameplay in this particular narrative forward. Whilst not genre-defining or groundbreaking in any way at the point that I am at, it is solid and satisfying for a long-time Assassin's Creed fan. Though I must say that it can have its flow broken purely by the sheer size of the open world. But as this is the same team that created Origins, my second favourite game in the series, I do have faith that the story may well ramp up as we move towards the campaign's conclusion. My second point is stealth. One of my biggest concerns coming into Valhalla was the impact of the RPG style of game on the Assassin's core concept of unseen assassinations. This had been eroded over time and tweaked heavily in Origins. There was the odd heavily armoured people that you couldn't kill in one hit, even when unseen with the hidden blade. But then Odyssey went deep, and all damage was done on an RPG scale, meaning a couple of levels difference between you and your target could leave that target alive, even after an animation of running Leonidas' spear through said enemy's throat. Taking away the core series' ability to stealthily kill people who I maybe could not take in head-on combat or didn't want to take in head-on combat, suddenly threw Odyssey out of balance with the rest of the series. In the lead up to Valhalla's release then, the now fired game director announced that one-shot assassinations were returning, if the player so wanted them to. Until I got my hands on the game, this comment didn't seem to make sense. It is, quite frankly, really easy though. There is an option within the options menu to turn on guaranteed assassinations, meaning that when you press the button to kill via the hidden blade, you assassinate, you kill them via the hidden blade. Assassinations are therefore fully back if you want them to be, or they can still be that RPG damage-based version if you want them to be. This move of opening up the game to be played in a way that suits each individual player seems to be the perfect balance between where we were, where we are, and where we are going with the series. Moment-to-moment stealth will depend fully on the difficulty setting that you have turned on for the title. Due to my experience with both Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft open world titles, I know the artificial intelligence isn't always great. So to give myself a challenge, I opted for the hardest stealth mode called Master Assassin. While not brutally tough, it does at least allow the AI to be on par with the likes of the base Ghost of Tsushima level. A game that really fulfilled my wants from the Assassin's Creed core gameplay so unbelievably well. Valhalla continues the series' stealth styling since Unity, by assigning a crouch button that allows Eivor to hide in local foliage or behind all sizes of object. Returning somewhat to the series' roots, there are aspects of social stealth as well. You can blend in by interacting with a variety of different world activities, from sitting on a bench similar to Ezio and Co, to doing woodwork and cooking. The stationary options are more vast than they've ever been within the series. More mobile social stealth, however, whilst still present, is still less than we've seen before in the series. From a narrative point, it does make some sense. The game is set before Altair's original title, and he could only blend in with monks rather than the entire crowd. But sense-making does not help series evolution, especially when it leaves you with a feeling of having tools taken away this far into the franchise. It's a big step up from Odyssey and Origins, which both had zero social stealth options. But with the noise that was made about it being back before launch, the actual implementation is disappointing. Overall then, I'd say that stealth in the game is acceptable. It serves its purpose, but it doesn't evolve the series' mechanics as you would sort of hope a third iteration would, with this being the third fully RPG-type game in the series. Outside of my two main concerns, the game still needs to stand on its own 2 feet. For me, Valhalla fails in this regard, due to a trend becoming all too familiar in big titles. Bugs. There is a laundry list 1,000,000 miles long that plagues this game. From game-breaking bugs like becoming locked in missions that you cannot complete or exit without reloading a save or the game, to things like Eivor becoming transparent. I have seen people walking around the open world with no heads, and my ability attacks will randomly stop partway through, presumably because a butterfly sneezes or something. Then there was the Yule drunkenness bug, where you were hammered every time you respawned, meaning the world was wobbly and the controls were limp. This really hampered your ability to progress missions and stories if you died during a combat mission. There are times where weapons will pass through enemies in combat and cause no damage, while you'll randomly take damage from a completely unknown source. Graphics will flicker on the regular, and you'll have light clipping through solid objects, or an asset flickering between 4K and 8-bit textures. For a title that also runs at a near solid 60 FPS on PlayStation 5, there are many assets in the game, like flying birds, flags, banners, and backdrops, that seem to have a Miles Morales Into the Spider-Verse 12 frames per second look. And it's incredibly jarring when everything around those assets is 6 times faster. Then there are the design decisions that I simply cannot understand. From the aforementioned low frame rate assets, through to yet again not being an assassin in Assassin's Creed. It's something that we've not had in the core gameplay of a new installment since Assassin's Creed Syndicate in 2015. And of the 2 characters there, only Evie actually felt like an assassin. Then there's also the hypocrisy of Eivor's words versus her actions. For example, she talks about respecting the animals that you hunt in one of the side quests, to make sure to be kind when you kill them and only take what you need. Yet, you will go out and hunt 40-odd rabbits to bring 8 rabbit feet back to an NPC simply because of the way that RNG works with the hunting mechanics. She also speaks of a Vikinger honor and face-to-face battles. But in my hands, she will then stealth around an entire fort and never enter open combat. Or she'll make personal romance decisions that undermine that whole honourable bravado. The game also doesn't outline the passage of time. Take Assassin's Creed 2 for example. You know exactly where you are in Ezio's life at every point. With each new sequence that loads, it tells you the date. It could just be a year, it could be a month, but you know what moment in time you are at. And that continued all the way through Syndicate. But because Valhalla doesn't have new memory sequences, and the cutscenes do not give you those dates, you are completely unaware of the passage of time. I played 2 missions with the same subset of characters, no more than 30 minutes apart from one another. And there's one character who is a 14-year-old noble when you first meet him. He looks identical throughout my entire time of meeting him in this game. But in the second mission that came 30 minutes after the first, him looking identical made no sense, considering he explicitly states that 2 years had passed since last we met. This lack of a timeline in-game breaks the immersion, as I find myself going externally to troll internet forums and articles to find out what the timeline is and where I am within it as part of Eivor's journey. Just so I know what is going on and when in the game that I am playing. There are also systems that were present in both Origins and Odyssey that are absent here, and Ubisoft have already made press releases mentioning that they will be added in a future patch or update. Every few minutes in this game, I am encountering another bug, another glitch, another poorly designed or implemented tool or decision that Playing the game, which should be a fully immersive experience with the story and underlying mechanics, is a chore rather than a joy. Now, I know Ubisoft games have never been flawlessly running titles or the best designed things out there. They are churned out too quickly and maybe don't undergo the rigorous playtesting that fans expect. Or maybe if they do, the notes aren't always embraced and met by the time the game is launched, simply to meet that launch window. This has led to buggy games in the past, with Assassin's Creed Unity being this franchise's annus horribilis. But the sheer quantity of issues in Valhalla should be an utter embarrassment to Ubisoft and the Assassin's Creed team. This is a AAA title, and a flagship franchise for the developer. Not only that, but they are asking a full next-gen premium price of £70 for the base version of the game, and then have the temerity to add a real-world money shop into the game atop a paid season pass for additional after-launch content. That is a lot of money for a single game. And to then launch in an unfinished and unpolished state is totally unacceptable. Now, Ubisoft are not the only ones guilty of this, with EA, Activision, Bungie and CD Projekt Red being as bad or worse in many cases in recent memory, to name but a few. But just because everybody does it, it does not excuse the practice of releasing unfinished or broken products and gladly taking fans' money. When a game is asking over a fifth of the price of a new generation console, or over 3 days minimum wage pay here in the UK, simply to experience its full story offerings, you best release a game that is worth that money and not a buggy, broken mess. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is not the former, and it is the latter. The poor design decisions and a bug-riddled game 3 months after launch undermine what is otherwise, at this 40-hour mark, what feels like an enjoyable and worthy entry into the franchise. However, it does remain to be seen how this links to the wider story laid down in 2007's Assassin's Creed, if the gameplay evolves and if the bugs can be fixed in the promised January patch. If Valhalla can right this keeling boat with the promised patches, you may find that this becomes one of the best titles in the entire series. Or at least sets up the next title to be that. For now though, my advice for this, and all future Assassin's Creed games, and all games full stop for that matter, is simply to wait. Companies aren't currently delivering on promises that they are making pre-launch, and they therefore do not deserve your hard-earned cash until they deliver a quality product out of the gate. Even if it's releasing in early access, you know that you're entering a buggy situation there, and that is a risk that you as a consumer take. But full titles like this should not be this broken 3 months after launch. And whilst I am totally enjoying the actual game and experience, my immersion is broken on so many occasions right now that I cannot yet recommend Assassin's Creed Valhalla to core series fans or newcomers alike. It will get there. Assassin's Creed Odyssey had many issues that were fixed over time, and we've seen Ubisoft fix other broken games, like Unity, which is now one of the smoothest and best games in the entire series, especially on next generation hardware. So wait. Pick up the game maybe once all of the DLC is out, and you should have yourself a cohesive and conclusive experience at that point. It is fun, it is a good game in its underlying mechanics, story and stealth, but my first impressions are it's not quite there yet. Anybody who's played it, what do you think? Do you think Assassin's Creed Valhalla is where it needs to be, that it is an excellent entry into the series? Or like me, do you feel that maybe it was released in an unfinished state, just to meet a release window and next generation hardware? Sound off in the comments. And if you do like this video, if you've enjoyed what you've heard or found it informative, please like the video, hit subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. It makes a massive difference to the channel. We are also, at the time of recording this, nearly at 100 subscribers. Thank you everybody who has found this channel and subscribed along the way. Your support means the absolute world, and hopefully we can keep this going to milestones like 1,000, 10,000, and so on beyond that. But for these first 100 people, thank you so much for being here. It means the absolute world. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys. As I've said, hit like, subscribe, bell. In the meantime, my name is Doragon. These are my first impressions of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and until next time, folks, have a wonderful day, and take care.